I'm Cailey. I'm a librarian at Mentor Public Library.
And I'm Meg, and I'm also a librarian at Mentor Public Library, and welcome to All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg, where each week we've been going over different book recommendations with a different theme. So this week's theme, we're going to be doing narrative nonfiction. Now this is just true stories that read like a fiction book.
Yes, and all of the books that we talk about today are available for free digitally on Libby by Overdrive or Hoopla with your library card. You can also give us a call and we can hold it for you for pickup here at the library curbside or drive-through.
Awesome. All right, so what's your first book today, Cailey?
My first book is called The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson. And this is sort of an unusual true crime story. It starts in 2009. Apparently, there was a 20-year-old American musician named Edwin Rist who robbed the British Museum of Natural History. And this was a massive heist of hundreds of bird skins.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. It takes you back a little, right?
Yeah.
And he actually did this largely due to his involvement in fly fishing.
Okay, what does that mean? That doesn't seem related at all.
Yeah, I know nothing about fly fishing, and I'm guessing you don't either.
Okay, no, I don't.
So apparently, in fly fishing, there are salmon flyers that are these colorful lures that are done with bird feathers. And it is thought that Victorian bird feathers, rare feathers, and exotic bird feathers are more successful than the others. They're more valuable, and there are apparently collectors of these items.
Hey, that answers it.
Yes. So the author, Johnson, is actually an avid fly fisherman himself, and he heard about this from another fly fisherman and was fascinated by it and sort of dove into the story himself to find out more about it. And that's kind of how this story is told, sort of from his perspective, trying to discover more about this case. And he discovers a lot about the specific items that were stolen, the specimens from the museum that were, some of them very valuable, over 150 years old. Some of them were collected by contemporaries of Darwin. Not easy to collect these specimens back in the day, and the museum really treasured them. And so he tries to find out what happened to them, what were recovered, what was never recovered, and he tells you a lot about how these were attained in the first place, as well as what their final fate was, if it's known, into the sort of detective story and law and order component of what actually happens to Rist for this. And as I said, I know nothing about fly fishing, but the author does a good job of explaining the basics and kind of making it accessible. And what's fascinating to me is that this book sort of exposes the fact that there's a seedy underbelly to almost everything in the world.
Yeah. Wow, that is fascinating. I had no idea there was any true story like that. So definitely very interesting.
And relatively recent too.
Yeah, really never heard of it. Wow. Now I know a little bit more about fly fishing, so thank you. So my next book is called Sophie, The Incredible True Story of the Castaway Dog by Emma Pearse. So this is a true story about a family from Queensland, Australia, and with their dog, Australian blue cattle dog, Sophie. And what this family liked to do was go out onto the ocean, because they lived close to the ocean, in their boat, and just as a family get-together thing. And one time when they were on the sea, there was this huge storm with tons of waves out on the water. And tragically, on this one particular day, Sophie, their dog, falls overboard, and their family is devastated.
Okay, I'm going to stop you.
Okay, what?
Does the dog die? Can you tell me?
Oh, okay. Minor spoiler for anyone who cannot read or watch a movie where the dog dies, the dog lives. Okay, I'm going to spoil.
Okay.
Okay.
You can tell me about the book now.
Yes, absolutely. Trust me, my mom's the same way. She can't watch it if the dog dies. So rest assured. But anyway, what happens is, so the family just assumes that Sophie is dead, and they're just like, well, we hope she didn't suffer. But the National Park Service, several months later, finds Sophie on an uninhibited island over 6 miles away from where the ship storm happened and where she fell overboard. So that means Sophie must have swam over 6 nautical miles of shark-infested waters onto this. It's like a miracle that she even survived that to get on this island. So it's totally uninhabited, wildlife, plant life everywhere. So basically the drama in this book is how the National Park Service goes about saving Sophie, because as anyone who ever watches like real life dog rescue missions, dogs can be like scared of being even saved. Like they'll hide like that. So this is like times 10 on an uninhabited island. So all the different ways they have to go to try and save her, and eventually try and reunite her with her family, hopefully. So it's really a sweet story, and I'm just so impressed with like the courage of this dog. And it's really cute because like interspersed throughout the story, they'll give little flashbacks of when they first found Sophie as a puppy, and how it gives you like an emotional connection. It gets you invested in them getting reunited with her family. So a really sweet story.
That sounds very sweet, and I'm glad that you spoiled the book for me.
Sorry, I had to. I just had to.
It was important.
Yes.
So my next book is historical. It's called The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown, who you might recognize his name. He did The Boys in the Boat. So this book is actually about the Donner Party, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Yeah, I've been interested, but never really knew anything about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's always used as sort of like the punchline to something about cannibalism. And I really didn't know anything about it going into this book either.
Right.
But so this book shows how there were like so many different factors that went into this tragedy, and how there's like so many different ways along the journey where it could have ended differently. So in 1846, the Donner Party was journeying from Midwest out to California. And this book largely follows a single family, although it does tell you a lot about the other families on the journey. It focuses a lot on the Graves family, which was a husband, wife, and their children, including their 21-year-old daughter, Sarah, who had recently married, and her husband came on the journey with them. Okay. So they set out from Illinois to go to California, and this is like pre-gold rush, so there's not really a lot of like well-known paths to do this. And so already the situation's pretty perilous because of that, and because it's the 1800s and this area was not well developed. So you find out right away that the very first mistake they made is when they left, because they should not have left as late in the year as they did, because they risked running into fall and winter weather, which was ultimately their doom. But along the way, you find out about all of these different reasons that lives could be lost on this type of journey, including accidents that would cause an injury that could get infected and that could kill you, or even just like all sorts of things on the road. There were illnesses, there were malnutrition and things like that, but many of the incidents that got them to where they were trapped, where the cannibalism occurred, were caused because of bad information. Word of mouth was the biggest thing for these different trails, and they went on the wrong path. And it's fascinating to see how this all really played out. The author draws from diaries, from letters, from first accounts in order to give us this information, but he also throws in stuff that like we know now. So we know now how high the snowfall was. We know now the results of some of these illnesses and injuries and different ways that this stuff works. So he does a great job of making this read like fiction, but brings you back to earth when you realize that this really happened. These poor people really suffered on this journey. And, even though you might think you know about the Donner Party, there's a lot to learn in this book.
That's interesting, man. Like I said, like you, I knew nothing about that. So it kind of makes me interested in wanting to read it about them. And also, they got the stories from diaries and things, how would we do that today? Because we don't really keep diaries. So I'm like,
your Snapchat stories?
Yeah, it's like gone forever. So I guess no one's going to recount our lives, Cailey, but that's okay. So for my last story, it's written by a prominent fiction African-American author named Jesmyn Ward. If her name sounds familiar to you all, she actually came out with a fiction book, Sing Unburied Sing, a couple of years ago. So it's really cool because even though she usually focuses on fiction, it's called Men We Reaped. And so this is about her childhood in rural Mississippi, where she grew up. She grew up in poverty, and kind of there's all the stuff that happened and how it related to, as she sought to become a writer. So she has to grow up quick. When she's barely turned into a teenager, she has to raise her younger siblings. She has some younger sisters and then one younger brother. So she talks about, the added responsibility she had growing up. And then as she gets into school age, going to college, she moves away to a different city. And she talks about how that is impacted by, the people she lives with at, like her family at home, their stories, like their struggles at home, while she's still in the city. And she kind of goes into that, and it bubbles over into the climaxes when she's in her 20s. In the short span of 5 years, 5 young Black men in her family and close friends die. So all within a short amount of time. Her brother, a couple of her cousins, and then some of her best friends. Suicide, one is a suicide, some drug overdose, and then a couple are just bad luck, like horrible accidents that happen. And so in this book, she just kind of makes her ask why. Why did this happen? So she kind of looks at some of the underlying racism in her hometown and kind of the conflicted feelings she has. Like she has that feeling of warmth because it's her hometown, but she also can see the reality of, some of the horrible, evil things that go on in her hometown. So she writes with beautiful prose. Wouldn't expect anything less an awesome fiction writer. So she it feels like an awesome fiction book, but it's just her real life. So I just find that really a powerful story from her.
Yeah, I'm sure it's well written. Didn't she win the National Book Award?
Twice, yeah.
So, twice.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm sure it's an amazing story. And I didn't realize that she had written a memoir. I know of her fiction stories. So
yeah, it came out in 2013, so it's a little bit older, but it's still awesome, relevant.
So that's all we have for today. We will be back next week.
All right. Yeah. So next week our theme is we're going to go back to teen books, and we're going to be looking at fairy tale inspired books. So check out for those.
And I'm sure there's many for us to choose from, because teen fiction loves a good fairy tale.
Absolutely. And just a short reminder, all the books that you heard about today, either available online through our Libby or Hoopla, or maybe even in physical format through our library. So let us know.
Yes, thanks for watching and happy reading.